Since college, I believed life would follow a clear path: education, career, love, and eventually family. My early 20s were full of ambition and possibilities. I met Steve during grad school, and we built a life of shared dreams, a stable home, and successful careers. Everything seemed on track. Over time, though, I sensed a shift. The thrill of our achievements faded, replaced by a restless feeling. Beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect life, an unnamed longing stirred. An itch for something different, beyond my carefully planned world. The laughter from the other side of the room grated on me. It wasn't that I disliked my colleagues, I just felt out of place. Most of them were in their early 20s, brimming with energy. At 35, I didn't feel old, but their liveliness highlighted a growing gap between us. I hadn't wanted to attend the company dinner, especially since Steve was working late and couldn't join me. The executive we were celebrating was from another team, and I barely knew him. Truthfully, this unease had been building for a while. On paper, life was perfect. A good job, a nice home, a loving husband. But I couldn't shake the feeling of questioning where it was all heading. Steve had been hinting at starting a family, but I wasn't ready. Many of my friends already had kids, but the thought of diapers, daycare runs, and endless toy pickups felt suffocating. It seemed too settled, too final. I wasn't there yet. Despite telling myself I was still young, the group of young women dancing and gossiping across the room made me feel older than 35. They were welcoming enough when I joined the company, but it was clear they saw me as older, which felt disheartening. "That's quite the racket they're making," came a voice beside me. I turned to see Alex Wilson. Surprised, I quickly composed myself. "Isn't that group a goldmine for a single guy like you?" I joked. Alex, divorced for 2 years and known for his charm, smirked. "Tried that, way too giggly and immature for my taste." With a playful grin, he started impersonating some of them, making me laugh uncontrollably. His humor and insight surprised me, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. I hadn't realized how engaging he could be. Lost in conversation, I didn't notice we were among the last at the party. "Wow, it's late," I said, checking my watch. "I should get home before Steve worries." Alex helped me with my coat and walked me to my car. Before I got in, I teased, "So, what is your type?" Without missing a beat, he said, "That's easy. Someone like you." He winked, closed the car door, and walked away. I sat in stunned silence. Was he flirting with me? No way. I'm a married woman, I thought. But as I drove home, replaying the evening, I felt a spark of confidence. Even if he was just teasing, he chose to spend the night talking with me. Maybe I'm not so over the hill after all. When I got home, Steve had just arrived. As we prepared for bed, I was surprised to feel a sudden desire. Steve, though tired, responded. But as he kissed me, I felt a familiar pattern take over. After 12 years of marriage, I could predict his every move. Steve was thoughtful and put my needs first, which was comforting, but truthfully a bit monotonous. Lately, I'd been craving more excitement. I closed my eyes and, as usual, imagined someone else. Tom Hardy had been my go-to until he grew that odd beard. This time, Alex Wilson's face appeared in my mind, sending a rush through me. I savored every second. When it was over, Steve caught his breath and said, "Wow, you were something tonight." I hugged him and said, "All you, love," before slipping into the bathroom. Steve was asleep when I returned, but I couldn't rest. My mind replayed the night and my earlier conversation with Alex. His parting words at the car echoed in my head. Finally, I forced myself to push the thoughts away and drifted to sleep. Monday was hectic. Just before lunch, a knock on my cubicle made me look up, and there stood Alex. I blushed instantly, annoyed with myself, but he didn't seem to notice. "Hey, Kathy, want to take a break and grab lunch?" he asked. Despite my workload, I accepted. He helped me with my coat, and we left before I could reconsider. I wondered if the younger women noticed. Part of me hoped they had. At a nearby bistro, we found a quiet table. Alex's conversation was as engaging as at the party, and the hour flew by. On the drive back, he suddenly asked, "Do you know anything about interior design?" Surprised, I replied, "I think I have decent taste." "Great," he said. "I just moved into a new condo and could use some advice on colors and patterns. Would you take a look sometime?" "Sure," I said, flattered. We reached the office, and he kept the engine running as he opened my door. "I need to get to the airport for a flight, but I'll be back in a few days. I'll reach out then." He leaned over and gave me a quick kiss on the lips. Shocked, I stood on the curb as he smiled and said, "Back to work," before driving off. As I walked to the office door, I found myself touching my lips, feeling confused yet excited. Did that goodbye kiss mean anything, I wondered? It felt flattering and gave my ego a boost. The rest of my afternoon productivity plummeted. On Wednesday, Steve had to work late again. I knew he was busy with a major project, but eating dinner alone felt disheartening. Picking at my takeout, I reminded myself, Steve's working hard for our future so we can start a family. But the truth was, I wasn't ready for that yet. I wanted to enjoy life while I still could, and eating takeout in front of the TV didn't count. Thursday was quieter at work. I was startled by a knock on my cubicle. "Hey, Kathy, looking good," Alex said. I instinctively fixed my hair and straightened my blouse. "Stop acting like a single woman," I chided myself. "So you're back," I said, trying to stay casual. "Yeah," he replied with his charming grin. Before I could say more, he continued, "I'm heading to a meeting, but I wanted to ask, could you come by my condo after work tomorrow to check out the design? I'd love your input." Caught off guard, I stammered, "I guess I could stop by for a bit." "Perfect," he said, flashing another smile before walking off. I sat in disbelief. Is this smart? I thought. It's just design advice, not anything else, I reassured myself. But a part of me felt nervous. Why did my mind go there? I pushed the thoughts aside when my phone rang, focusing back on work. That evening at home, I intended to bring up my plans to Steve, not to ask for permission, but just to keep him in the loop. Before I had the chance, he spoke first. "Do we have plans for Friday night?" Steve asked. "No, not really," I replied. "I have to work late again. We need to wrap up the proposal for Monday's meeting." "Sorry, babe. I'll make it up to you," he said. A mix of emotions washed over me. Frustration at facing another night alone, quickly followed by excitement at the prospect of visiting Alex. If Steve isn't coming home, why shouldn't I go? "Don't worry about it," I said reassuringly. "Thanks, babe. I'm glad you understand. I promise to make it up to you," he repeated. I forced a smile, feeling a twinge of guilt over the small deception. On Friday morning, I spotted Alex heading to my cubicle, and a thought crossed my mind. He's going to cancel tonight. I'd even dressed up a bit to avoid looking frumpy. But before I could dwell on it, he appeared and asked, "Hey, Kathy, are you still good for tonight?" Relief hit me. "Yes," I answered quickly. "And Steve's working late, so I'm not in a rush." Alex's eyes widened briefly. Then he grinned and handed me a note. "Here's my address. Come by whenever you can." He winked and walked away. I held the paper, pleased the evening was still on, but annoyed at mentioning Steve's plans. Why say that? I wondered, but reassured myself. You were just letting him know there's no hurry. The afternoon dragged. I checked the clock repeatedly and told myself, don't rush over right at 5 o'clock. Don't seem eager. By 5:15, I was refreshing my makeup. Soon after, I was in my car, tapping the steering wheel as traffic slowed me down. You're just curious about his condo's design, I told myself. Arriving at the address, I saw a modern 10-story building replacing old shops. Some landscaping remained unfinished, but it was already attractive. I double-checked the address. Alex's condo was on the top floor. The view must be incredible, I thought. He opened the door after my first knock, wearing dark slacks and a pastel peach shirt, unbuttoned just enough to reveal a hint of chest hair. He looked casually elegant, grinning widely. Glad you came. Do you like Pinot Grigio? He asked. I nodded, accepting a chilled glass. He guided me inside, and I took a sip to steady myself. The condo had a refined mix of grays, creams, and dark wood, accented with bright, abstract art. Wow, I said. Did you do this? I'm impressed. We moved through the space as he pointed out features, refilling my glass until, by the third, I felt light and giddy. In the kitchen, he took my empty glass and said, I think you'll love the bedroom. With a hand on my lower back, he led me down the hall. My body tingled as he opened the doors, revealing a large bed framed by floor-to-ceiling windows with a city view. This is amazing, I said, turning to him. He pulled me close, hands on my hips, and kissed me. You're so beautiful. I've wanted you for so long, he said, before kissing me again. I didn't resist. I felt swept away, thinking, he wants me? This gorgeous man can't resist me. The thought flooded me with exhilaration. I usually preferred a lot of foreplay, but there was no need this time. Afterward, I must have passed out because when I opened my eyes, Alex was next to me, catching his breath. I placed my hand on his chest and said, that was the best I've ever had. He caressed my face. I felt the same. You were amazing. Embarrassed by my reaction, I added, sorry for all the noise. Hope your neighbors don't call the cops. He laughed. Don't worry. This is an end unit and the condo next door is empty. You're safe. I blushed and we shared tender kisses. Alex was fit, not overly muscular, but more passionate than I expected. Unlike Steve, who never went for more than once a night, Alex clearly had other ideas. We went at it again, this time with more intensity. When we finished, I playfully said, "If I don't leave now, I'll never get home." He reluctantly let me go, but joined me in the shower, where it happened a third time. By the time I was ready to leave, it was 11:30, and panic set in. What will I tell Steve? Alex kissed me at the door. This isn't over, I want more. The words thrilled me as I left. Driving home felt surreal. I dreaded explaining my lateness to Steve, but my thoughts kept returning to the night. When I arrived, relief washed over me. Steve's car wasn't there. I undressed and slipped into bed. When he came in half an hour later, I pretended to be asleep. "Sorry I'm so late, babe," he whispered. "It's all right," I replied, smiling in the dark. Despite my exhaustion, guilt and memories battled in my mind. It was wrong but unforgettable. My last thought before sleep was Alex's promise. It's not over. Saturday felt routine, but my mind was in turmoil. Part of me felt deep shame. "You cheated on Steve," it scolded. "You should be ashamed." But another voice countered. "So what? He's been neglecting you, wrapped up in work. You're a young woman with unmet needs. He's working hard for your future, for the family you said you wanted," the guilt argued. "She wants that," the defiant side responded, "but not now. She needs to live a little, break free from this suburban routine." "This isn't a prison," the guilt rebuked. "Many would envy your life. And many would jump at the chance to experience what she did last night," the defiant side shot back. The thrill, the passion, it was like something out of a romance novel. I had never felt so desired. Even my honeymoon wasn't this intense. To be wanted like that by someone as attractive as Alex was intoxicating. I want more, I thought, just once or twice more. It's not taking from Steve. It's a small indulgence after years of being a faithful wife. I didn't expect the excitement from my time with Alex to last this long. All week I kept replaying the moments, savoring the thrill of my secret. So when Alex invited me to lunch at his condo today, I knew what was coming and couldn't wait. If he hadn't made a move, I would have, I thought. By the time we stepped inside, we were desperate for each other, and it was incredible, better than I'd hoped. Walking back to my cubicle, I felt euphoric, smiling at the 20-somethings who likely saw me as the dull married woman. If they only knew, I thought smugly, he chose me, not them. Later, I met Nancy at a coffee shop, desperate for someone to talk to. Nancy had been my college roommate, and after she moved to town with her husband, Terry, we reconnected. She greeted me warmly, and once we sat down, I leaned in closer. "I need to tell you something, but you can't tell anyone. Not even Terry," I said. Her expression shifted to curiosity mixed with concern. "You can tell me." "I'm having an affair," I admitted, my voice laced with an odd sense of pride. Her smile faded instantly. "You mean, with another man?" she asked. "Yes, and it's been amazing," I said, brushing off her discomfort. "I just had to share it with someone." "What about Steve? Are you planning to leave him?" Nancy pressed. "No, I have no intention of leaving him. This is just about exploring my sensual side," I replied. "Really? Like treating yourself to a spa day?" I joked, attempting to lighten the mood, but Nancy didn't respond with a laugh. "How do you act normal around Steve?" she asked, her voice low. "Steve's so absorbed in his work, he barely notices," I said. "But that's not what I came to discuss. Let me tell you about Alex." "No," Nancy interrupted, raising a hand. "I don't want to know who it is." She hesitated, her eyes narrowing. "It's not Terry, is it?" "Of course not," I snapped, feeling a sting of offense. "I'd never do that to you." "But you did it to Steve," she said quietly, her voice filled with disappointment. I took a sip of my latte, realizing the conversation was spiraling away from what I'd expected. Nancy reached out and squeezed my hand. "Kathy, I love you like a sister, but this is risky. If Steve finds out, he'll never forgive you. You could lose everything." "He won't find out," I said, though a hint of fear crept in. "You promised not to tell anyone, remember?" "I won't," she said, "but I wish you hadn't told me." Nancy and I finished our lattes, but our plans to go shopping were abandoned. I headed to my car, berating myself. Why did I tell Nancy? I thought she'd be supportive, but now she thinks I'm wrong. A darker thought crept in. What if she tells Terry? He'd definitely tell Steve. I was so distracted I nearly ran a stop sign. Shaken, I pulled over to calm myself. An accident is the last thing I need. Hoping for a distraction, I reached for my phone to check messages from Alex, eager to plan our next meetup. But my phone wasn't in my purse. Panic set in as I retraced my steps. Did I leave it at the coffee shop? No, I hadn't used it with Nancy. Last time was at home when I texted Alex. What if Steve finds it and reads the messages? I sped home praying Steve wasn't there. But as I entered, I nearly collided with him. "Back so soon?" he asked. "I thought you were shopping with Nancy." "I was, but I forgot where we were meeting. Realized I left my phone at home," I said, improvising. "You mean this?" he said, holding it out. My heart stopped, but he just smiled. "Found it on your dresser." He kissed me, and I took the phone, walking back to my car. I slumped over the wheel, tension melting away. Too close. I need to be more careful. Having an affair was turning out to be hard work. I checked my phone. Still no message from Alex. Damn, it had been nearly 2 weeks since we last met, and 5 days without a word. I remembered getting a strange look from his secretary the last time I visited, so I avoided going back. Asking others would only fuel gossip. What if he's lost interest? I worried. I don't want to be ghosted. I debated calling him, but didn't want to seem desperate. He can be so arrogant, but I'm still so restless. Steve had mentioned over dinner that he'd be out of town this weekend until Tuesday, making my mood worse. And what frustrated me more was learning that the whole team, including Daryl and Linda, would be joining him. Steve introduced me to Daryl and Linda at an office party months ago. While Daryl left no impression, I immediately disliked Linda. She was attractive, younger, and hung on Steve's every word. When he praised her as intelligent and driven, I felt uneasy. Why is she going on this trip? I wondered. A dark thought crept in. Is Steve having an affair with her? Once planted, I couldn't shake it. It explained his late nights and frequent trips. He must be with her, I thought bitterly. Steve sensed something was off and held my hand. I know this is tough, but it'll pay off for us. When I'm back, we'll have time together, I promise. For a moment, I believed him. But later, doubts returned as we lay in bed. What if he's been with Linda all along? What if he plans to leave me? I felt humiliated at the thought. I considered calling Nancy, but realized I just told her about my affair. I can't accuse Steve now. What a mess, I whispered, tears falling as sleep eluded me. The next day, Alex finally called. We're meeting this weekend, he said, and excitement shot through me. With Steve leaving Friday until Tuesday, I planned to have Alex over for the weekend. Knowing Steve would be with Linda made my decision bold. Friday morning, as Steve left, I could barely contain my excitement. The plan was set. I'd follow Alex to his condo after work, then drive him to my house to avoid a suspicious car in the driveway. Just before leaving work, my phone rang. Nancy. "Hey, Steve told Terry about the trip. Want to join us for dinner tonight?" she asked. "Thanks, Nancy, but I'm busy tonight," I said, guilt gnawing at me. "How about tomorrow?" she pressed. "I'm busy then too," I replied, hesitating. "Oh," she said, sounding hurt. After a pause, she added, "Be careful, Kathy. I don't want you to get hurt." "Don't worry, Nancy. I'll be fine," I said, trying to sound confident. After Nancy hung up, I cursed under my breath. The last thing I wanted was suspicion about my weekend plans. Worse, Nancy would need to explain my unavailability to Terry, Steve's good friend. Damn, I thought, imagining being with Alex in my marital bed. I'll have to wash all the sheets before Steve comes home. The weekend was a whirlwind of passion. By Sunday afternoon, after dropping Alex off, I was exhausted but content. I spent the rest of the day cleaning and preparing the house for Steve's return. He came back late Tuesday, too tired to unpack, and left early for work the next morning. We didn't talk until Wednesday night. Steve burst through the door, excited. "We got the contract! The client loved our presentation. I'm getting a big bonus and might be up for a promotion." "That's amazing," I said, going to hug him. But he stopped me, looking serious. "I called your office today and talked to your boss," he said. My heart froze. "I told him you've been working too hard," he continued, ignoring my reaction. "He agreed and gave you Friday and Monday off, so we can go to Cancun for a long weekend." He smiled, proud of his surprise. Relief washed over me and I hugged him, holding back my emotions. Steve whispered, "I know I've been distant, but I'll make it up to you. This weekend, we'll reconnect." He kissed me. "Maybe we can even talk about starting a family." I hugged him tighter, speechless and not ready for that talk. Sitting at my desk after our Cancun trip, I felt heavy with guilt. What should have been a perfect weekend was a disaster for me. Steve planned everything as a romantic surprise, showing how devoted he was. The reality struck hard. Steve wasn't involved with Linda. He was simply working to build our future. He was a loving husband, and I had repaid him with betrayal. Every thoughtful gesture from Steve deepened my guilt. I acted cheerful, which he took as a sign for more romance, leading to nightly lovemaking. Despite his attentiveness, I faked my climax, something I'd never done before. Afterward, I lay awake, crying silently, ashamed of myself. The worst came the night before we left. After dancing and drinking more than usual, Steve was passionate, different from his norm. For a brief moment, I enjoyed it, until I almost moaned Alex's name at the peak of pleasure. I stopped myself just in time, but the fear liquidated any pleasure. Steve didn't seem to notice and thanked me for the passionate night, even apologizing for being rough. I reassured him, said I loved it, and held him until he fell asleep. Once he did, I silently cried. "What have I become?" I whispered. My phone buzzed under my pillow, set to vibrate so Steve wouldn't hear. The message from Alex read, "Where are you? I need you." Along with it was a photo of him unclothed. I deleted them, but not before feeling a familiar thrill. A girl likes to know she's wanted, I thought bitterly. On Wednesday at work, Alex called and asked when we could meet. We planned for Friday night. I told Steve some office friends were going out, and he, still trying to make up for lost time, agreed. "Damn," I muttered after hanging up. "What a cheap person I've become." Thursday brought an unexpected surprise when I ran into Nancy at the grocery store. She approached me with a mix of caution and excitement in her eyes. "Nancy, what's going on?" I asked, curious. Her eyes lit up as she leaned in. "There's something different about you," she teased, then paused before sharing her news. "I'm pregnant. Terry and I are having a baby." "That's amazing," I said, hugging her. We talked for a while, her joy contagious. But on my drive home, sadness crept in. Nancy's news stirred memories of wanting a family with Steve. Jealousy pricked at me. "I want a baby too," I whispered, feeling tears well up. "You can't start a family with Steve while sleeping with Alex," my conscience mocked. That thought sealed my decision. The fling with Alex had been exciting, but it was time to end it. Friday would be the last time. After that, I would focus on Steve and repairing our life together. The decision brought relief. The stress of sneaking around was too much. Now I had a way out. Friday morning, I prepared for my last meeting with Alex, determined to make it memorable. I packed a special outfit and, after work, changed in the ladies' room into a light trench coat, a fedora, and high black heels. When I rang Alex's doorbell, he opened it, eyes widening as I revealed the black bra, string underwear, and garter belt beneath the coat. His stunned look showed I'd made my mark. He pulled me in, our need intense and immediate. That night, I made sure Alex wouldn't forget me. Afterward, as we lay on the carpet, I met his gaze. "Alex, you've been the best lover I've ever had. These past months have been incredible," I said. His expression shifted, a shadow of realization crossing his face. "You're ending this, aren't you?" "Yes," I replied. "I've decided to focus on my future with Steve. It's time to start a family." "But we don't have to stop," he argued. "You enjoyed tonight as much as I did." "I did," I admitted, "but I need to concentrate on my marriage without distractions." He exhaled slowly, resignation settling in. "I guess I always knew this would end, just not now." "Thank you for understanding," I said, getting up. "And no joining me in the shower this time." He gave a small nod. "Understood." When I returned home, Steve was waiting at the door. "How was your girls' night?" he asked, scanning my face for clues. "The usual," I said with a casual shrug. "Gossip, laughter, maybe a little too much wine." It was fun. He seemed satisfied with my response, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had taken significant risks, but it seemed like I'd gotten away with it. Sitting beside him, I reached for his hand. "I'm going to be the most devoted wife ever," I silently vowed. "Honey, remember when I mentioned Nancy's news?" I asked. Steve nodded. "I talked to Terry," he said. "He's over the moon." "I've been thinking," I said. "Maybe it's time we try for a baby too. What do you think?" Steve's response surprised me. He hesitated. "I thought you wanted to wait a few more years." "I did, but I've changed my mind. The time feels right now." Steve frowned, his brow creasing. "It's a big decision and work is intense right now. I need some time to think." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my tone steady. "But you said you wanted kids." "I do," he said. "Just give me a week or two to process it." I held back tears, knowing pushing him would only make things worse. Something else was going on, and I needed to find out what. As I lay in bed, frustration gnawed at me. My plan, ending things with Alex and starting fresh with Steve, was falling apart. What's making him hesitate? I wondered. Work is better after landing that contract, so what's the issue? Suddenly it hit me. My God, it's Linda, I whispered. He is having an affair with her. The realization hit me like ice. Steve's hesitation and distance had to be because of Linda. If true, it wasn't just physical, it involved emotions. Was this a real affair? The thought of him choosing her burned inside me. Images of Linda, her perfect hair, confident smile, and the way she hung on Steve's every word haunted me. How could I compete? She was younger, ambitious, and admired him deeply. Panic surged through me. I can't lose him, I thought, the idea making me sick. It became clear how much I needed Steve, a thoughtful and caring man. I couldn't let Linda win. A voice whispered, "Steve is honest. He wouldn't leave you if you were pregnant." The idea struck hard. It was manipulative, but it was my only plan. If I was carrying his child, Steve wouldn't abandon me. I need to act fast, I resolved, deciding to stop taking birth control. The plan helped me sleep, though fitfully. The following days were tense. Steve was distant, and I was convinced it was Linda. Every time he seemed lost in thought, my chest tightened. Confronting him would only push him toward her, so I stuck to my plan, hoping to get pregnant quickly. Stick to the plan, I repeated to myself. I coaxed Steve into making love twice that week, careful to make it feel natural. He seemed reluctant, but I managed. I considered using what I'd learned with Alex to distract Steve, but dismissed it. Keep it familiar, I reminded myself. This is about our future, not seduction. The tension gnawed at me, imagining Steve with Linda. But I had to act as the loving, unaware wife, even as it drained me. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. "This is Kathy. How can I help you?" I said. It was Alex. "See me again. I miss you," he said. A part of me felt flattered, but I was irritated by the distraction. I whispered sharply, "Alex, it's over. We can't do this." "Come on, admit it. It was great," he teased. "Yes, it was," I said, shaking my head. "But I can't see you again. I'm off the pill. I want Steve's baby." "There's protection," he said, voice husky. "Just one more time. Don't you want that? Don't you?" I hesitated. My time with Alex had been beyond anything Steve and I shared, and the craving flared up. But thoughts of Steve with Linda twisted that desire into jealousy. Why should he get to have fun while I stay the loyal wife? I thought with a bitter smile. Against my better judgment, I said, "All right, Alex, one last time. Thursday at lunch." He laughed triumphantly. "You won't regret it." Regret hit immediately after, but desire had been sparked. Just one more time. Then it's over, I told myself. On Thursday, I rang Alex's doorbell, nerves coiling in my stomach with anticipation. He pulled me in and kissed me fiercely. Clothes scattered as we made it to the bedroom, shutting out the world. Lying beside him, I said, "I'm going to miss this, but it can't happen again, promise me." Reluctantly, he agreed. I showered, dressed, and returned to the office, feeling triumphant. If Steve was with Linda, at least I had my own secret. Driving home, I was delayed and surprised to find Steve's car in the driveway. Inside, the house was dark and quiet. Anxiety gripped me. "Steve?" I called. No answer. I checked every room until I found him in the den, sitting in an armchair under a dim lamp. His face was tear-streaked, his jaw clenched. "Steve, is everything okay?" I asked, forcing calm. "No, Kathy. Everything is not okay," he said, eyes filled with pain. I knelt beside him. "What's wrong, Steve? Is it your parents?" He pulled away, handing me a photo. It showed me standing at Alex's door. A chill ran through me. No, this can't be real. "Steve, what is this?" I said, trying to sound confused. "Maybe this one will help," he replied, handing me another photo of me leaving Alex's condo, Alex's hand on my wrist. "Steve, it's not what you think," I said too quickly. "And what do I think, Kathy?" he asked coldly. I scrambled for an explanation. "Those are pictures of me picking up work documents from Alex's place. You know Alex, right? He works with me. That's all it was." He handed me another photo. This one showed me in a trench coat, holding it open suggestively in front of Alex's door. My face was obscured by a hat, but hope flickered. It wasn't fully revealing. "I don't know who that is. Why are you showing me these?" I pressed. The final photo crushed my hope. It showed me entering Alex's building earlier that day, time-stamped. I closed my eyes, willing it to disappear, but it stayed. "Oh, right. I stopped by today for work," I said, trying to bluff my way through. He let the photo fall into his lap, shaking his head in frustration. "Stop lying to me, Kathy," he said in a flat tone. Then he brought out another picture, this one showing the building from a different angle. The camera had focused on a window on the top floor, and I flinched at the sight of the woman pressed against the glass. A man stood behind her. Embedded in the photo was a zoomed-in shot, clearly captured with a powerful telephoto lens. It was undeniable that the face against the glass was mine. He looked up at me, his eyes unreadable, and said harshly, "Don't tell me that isn't you or that you were just picking up more business papers." I collapsed in front of him, overwhelmed with terror. I was caught. He had undeniable proof of my affair. I was going to lose him. I was going to lose everything. I started sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Steve. I don't know what came over me. I never meant for it to happen." Panic surged through me. "It was only once, Steve. You have to believe me. It was just that one time." He shook his head, his voice now cold and distant. "One time. Only after a friend mentioned seeing you at that condo repeatedly did I hire a detective. He managed to get surveillance inside the building on the floor where Alex's condo is. I know for certain you were with Alex twice in the past 2 weeks, but the detective spoke to someone who confirmed this has been going on for months." Rage burst within me, and I shouted without thinking, "Nancy must have told you! I can't believe she would betray me like that!" Shock registered on Steve's face. Nancy knew and didn't warn me. God, Terry probably knows too, and I thought they were my friends." His eyes narrowed. "Actually, your girlfriend didn't tip me off, but it wouldn't have mattered. Once the detective started asking questions, plenty of people were willing to talk about your affair, including those girls at your office you go drinking with. Oh wait, I forgot. You didn't actually go out with them. You just used them as cover while Alex was with you." I sat there on the floor, my mind spinning. All I could think about was which of the young office gossips had exposed me. After a moment, I realized it didn't matter. What mattered was that Steve knew everything about my affair. When someone is faced with undeniable proof of their wrongdoing, the only option left is to beg for mercy. "Oh God, Steve, I am so sorry. I let myself get swept up, and once it started, I was too afraid he'd tell if I tried to stop. Please, Steve, you have to forgive me. Give me another chance. I want to have your children. I'd be such a good mother, such a devoted wife to you. Please, Steve. Please." He stared at me for a long moment, and I dared to hope he might forgive me. Then he said calmly, "Would it shock you to know that while you and Alex were playing around at his condo, I've been having an affair with Linda the entire time?" Something snapped inside me, and I began screaming. "I knew it! I knew that woman was after you! Oh, Steve, how could you? I'll never forgive you for this!" "Stop!" Steve shouted, his voice so loud it stunned me. "Listen to yourself, Kathy. You want me to forgive your affair, but you'd never forgive me if it were the other way around." He shook his head. "For the record, I'm not having an affair with Linda, and more importantly, I've never been unfaithful to you. But now I know exactly what you'd have done if I had." I started crying again, harder than before. Steve remained motionless, not reacting at all, just sitting in silence until my sobs faded. I looked up at him helplessly. "Is there any way you could forgive me, Steve? If you could find it in your heart, I swear I'd be the most loving, faithful wife. You'd never have to doubt my love again. I'd do anything to prove it, and I'd keep proving it for the rest of my life. I swear, Steve." He stared at me for what felt like forever before he finally sighed. "I believe you, Kathy. I believe you mean every word, but I also believed you meant every word in your wedding vows. And after breaking your promises so willingly and repeatedly, I could never trust that you wouldn't do it again." I had no response to that. I looked up at him in despair. It's not fair. Today was going to be the last time. I would never have seen him again if you hadn't found out. His face was bitter. "If that's meant to comfort me, Kathy, it isn't working." We sat in silence for what felt like ages. Finally, Steve looked at me again and asked quietly, "There's one thing I want to know, Kathy. Why did you do it? Was it something I did or didn't do in our marriage?" "No, it wasn't you," I said, unable to meet his eyes. "It was all me. I wasn't looking to cheat, but the chance came and I let it happen. Maybe I was afraid of getting older. Maybe I felt less attractive than I used to." I looked at him. "But those are just excuses. The truth is, I did it." And I started to cry again. I don't really know why. He looked at me with sadness for a moment before handing me a thick stack of papers. I had a good idea of what they were, but he confirmed it. "This is a copy of the divorce petition my lawyer filed with the court today. You need to get an attorney of your own to review the proposed settlement." I started flipping through the pages when a line caught my attention. "You're filing for divorce on the grounds of infidelity?" I asked. "Couldn't it just be irreconcilable differences?" "No," he said firmly. "I'm not going to let people think I was the one at fault. I did everything I could to be a good, loyal husband. If any of our friends are curious about why we're divorcing, I don't want anyone assuming it was because of me." Now that my fate was sealed, anger surged at how spiteful he was being. "I can't accept that," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "If you file on those grounds, I'll fight it. I'll bring Linda into this and countersue if I have to. I can make this long, messy, and costly." He sighed. "I told my lawyer you weren't like that, Kathy, that you wouldn't make a scene, but he said we should be prepared just in case. And I guess he was right. Maybe you'd like to see what the detective agency sent over today." He took out his phone and swiped his thumb across the screen. I gasped when I saw footage of Alex and me in bed together. "There's enough material to make me wealthy. If I start putting this online, you'll either agree to my divorce terms or these videos, and more like them will be entered as evidence. Do you really want your parents and friends seeing this?" He looked at me coldly, stood up, and began walking away, but then turned back. "You should let Alex know that the soundproofing in his building is terrible." I was in the break room, pouring a cup of coffee, when one of the men from the office brushed past me. "Hey, Kathy, how's it going?" he asked with a sly grin. "I'm fine, Barry," I answered shortly, hoping to cut the conversation short. It didn't work. "I heard you're back on the market," he continued eagerly. "How about we grab some drinks after work? Maybe have some fun?" He reached out and lightly ran his fingers over my elbow. I stepped back, shocked. "You're married, Barry. You have a wife and kids." "What are you thinking?" I said sharply. He smirked. "From what I heard, that wouldn't bother you. You were married and you were with another man. Come on, it'd just be a little harmless fun. No one needs to know." I pushed past him and hurried back to my desk. From somewhere in the office, I thought I heard the sound of giggling, but I didn't dare look up. When I sat down, I slumped in my chair and put my face in my hands. Oh God, is this what I have to deal with now? Being fair game for every wannabe player at work? Even though our house had a sold sign out front, someone had left a flyer in the mailbox about a neighborhood party. I thought it might be a chance to say goodbye to some neighbors before moving. Honestly, I was lonely and tired of spending nights alone in front of the TV. A tent had been set up in an empty lot, and people were gathered around a portable grill where hot dogs were cooking. I filled a plastic cup with beer from a keg and walked through the crowd until I saw a neighbor who once lent us tools. I went over to chat. He was friendly and said he was sorry to hear about the divorce and wished me well. It felt good to hear something kind, but it didn't last long. A few moments later, his wife stormed over and angrily told me to stay away from her husband. I was stunned. "I just came over to say goodbye," I protested. She pointed her finger at me accusingly. "I've heard all about you and your morals," she said loudly. "Everyone in the neighborhood knows. This is the only warning you'll get. Stay away from my husband." I noticed we had drawn a crowd. I dropped my beer, turned, and pushed through the crowd with tears streaming down my face. The humiliation was unbearable. "They're acting like I'm some kind of infamous seductress," I whispered as I rushed home. Today, I resigned from my job. The constant whispers, sidelong glances, and giggles that erupted whenever I walked out of a room had become too toxic to endure. I never found out which coworker talked to the detective, and the uncertainty only made things worse. I felt like an outcast, a pariah. It was time to leave. Last night I called my parents and asked if I could come stay with them for a while. It was difficult to admit I needed to do that, but I had nowhere else to go. I hoped that maybe it would be easier to rebuild my life in a familiar place. There was just one last call to make, a number I hadn't dialed in ages. "Hello?" Nancy's voice came through the line. "It's me, Kathy," I said hesitantly, my voice trembling. "I'm leaving town, and I just wanted to talk to you one last time before I go." "Kathy, you almost cost me my marriage," she said sternly. "When Terry found out I knew about your affair, he was furious. It took him a while to convince Steve that he didn't know either. I'm so sorry, Nancy. I never meant to cause you any trouble. I wasn't thinking straight back then. Anyway, I wish you a beautiful, healthy baby and hope the three of you are very happy together. I also hope that maybe one day you can forgive me." Tears welled up as I started to hang up, but Nancy stopped me. "Wait, Kathy. I don't hate you. It's just that Terry was so angry about everything. He'd be furious if he knew I was talking to you now. I understand, I sniffled. I'll make this quick. Just one more thing. Have you seen Steve? How's he doing? I haven't talked to him since he left. Everything has gone through the attorneys. You don't know, do you? She replied. Steve's been transferred to his company's headquarters on the West Coast. No, I didn't know that, I said, my voice faltering. I'm glad he's doing well, I said sincerely. He deserves the best. Nancy's voice softened. I don't think he's doing that well. He only took the transfer because there were too many memories here. Terry spoke to him recently and said Steve is still miserable. He just buries himself in work and hasn't started dating or anything. Terry's worried about him. My sadness deepened. Do you have his number, Nancy? Maybe I could call him. No, she said sharply. If you called him, Terry would find out and know I gave it to you. I'm sorry, Kathy, I just can't. I understand, I said sadly. Take care, Nancy. Maybe send me a picture of the baby when it's born. I paused. I'm sorry for everything. I love you. I love you too, Kathy, she said, pausing before adding, but it's best if you don't call again. Then the line went silent. I'd packed what I needed in the car. The rest was in storage and would be shipped once I settled back in my old hometown. It was time to leave this city and this life behind. As I drove toward the highway, I couldn't help but smirk when my route took me past Alex's condo. I glanced over and was stunned to see his sports car parked out front. Curiosity got the better of me, so I pulled over to see if I could catch a glimpse of him. Since the confrontation with Steve, I hadn't seen or heard from Alex. At first, I avoided him because he was the reason for my downfall, but recently I'd grown so lonely that I tried to contact him, though without success. He seemed to be avoiding me, and while it hurt, I could understand. Maybe he thought Steve might come after him. Steve wasn't like that, but Alex wouldn't know. Then I saw Alex step out of the car and walk to the passenger side to open the door. A woman stepped out and she looked familiar. I squinted, then my eyes widened in shock. It was Linda. That conniving woman. I tried to calm myself. I'd ended things with Alex. He was free to be with anyone. I didn't have any issues with Linda. She'd never had an affair with Steve. But seeing them together set me on edge. I shook my head. It really was time to leave this place and all its painful memories. I pulled back onto the road and drove away, not sparing another glance at Alex and Linda. Linda handed Alex an envelope and gave him a businesslike nod. Here's the $10,000 for taking on the job, plus another $1,000 for successfully completing it, just as we agreed. Alex took the envelope and slipped it into his inside pocket, without glancing at it. Pleasure doing business with you, Linda, he said, smirking. Then, with a curious tilt of his head, he added, Why did you pick me to seduce her? Linda looked at him as if the answer was obvious. Are you kidding? After living next to you for a year, watching the endless stream of women you brought home and hearing their moans through the walls, I knew you were the perfect man for the job. The fact that you worked at the same company was just a bonus. Alex chuckled smugly. I guess I do have my talents. But what made you so sure she'd fall for it so easily? A sly smile played on Linda's lips. Women can sense these things. When I met her at that office party, I noticed how she scanned the room, sizing up the men and comparing herself to the women. She was ready for an affair, whether she realized it or not. I knew she'd take the bait, even for someone like you. He stiffened slightly at the dig, but chose to stay quiet, knowing she was right. After a moment of silence, Alex asked, So, when did you decide to go after him? Linda's eyes took on a distant, reflective look. 18 months ago. I fell in love with him the moment I joined his team and started planning from that day. Alex's eyes widened. You've been plotting this for 18 months? Linda smiled. These things take time, Alex. First, I had to earn his professional respect, then become his friend, and finally his confidant. But why go to all this trouble involving me and his wife? Alex asked. Why not just seduce him yourself and take him from her? You're attractive enough to pull it off. Linda ignored the flattery. He would never leave his wife, no matter how he felt about me. His loyalty to her was one of the reasons I knew he was the one for me. Alex's brow furrowed. So why didn't you act sooner, right after she first came to me? Why not reveal it then? You don't get it, she said. I had to follow the plan. I couldn't risk him forgiving her for a one-time mistake. It needed to be a full-blown affair, something he could never move past. Alex nodded slowly. Now I have a question for you, she said. Would you have approached her if I hadn't brought you the offer? He shook his head. No. I prefer younger women. There are plenty at the office who... He cut himself off abruptly. But I do like women your age, Linda. Is there any chance— Don't even think about it, she said coldly. Just then, a taxi pulled up to the parking area. Linda pointed to her luggage, and the driver began loading it into the trunk. So, you're headed to the West Coast? Alex asked, a bit wistfully. That's right, she nodded. My transfer was just approved. I start at headquarters next week. Alex studied her carefully. How can you be so sure you'll get him? With his wife out of the picture, I have an open path. The timing couldn't be better. He's had time for the pain of her betrayal to ease. He's lonely and hates the idea of starting over. He's ready. You seem confident, Alex said. Don't you have any doubts? She got into the cab and rolled down the window. Not at all, she said with a confident smile. Steve is picking me up at the airport. Alex shook his head in disbelief. You're something else. Like a real Machiavelli. No, she replied. Just focused and highly motivated. She waved as the taxi headed toward the airport. 2 weeks later, Steve sat at the bar finishing his drink when he heard a voice behind him. I hope I'm not late, the man said. Steve turned and gave a nod. Good to see you, Mr. Steele. Call me Matt, the man replied, sliding into the seat next to him. You were right about your friend Linda. She was involved with Alex, paid him in cash. Here are the photos. There's Alex, and that's Linda handing over the money. Steve glanced at the images, a knowing expression crossing his face. Looks like Linda has her sights set on me. It's irrelevant, Steve said calmly. I just needed to know who to keep at arm's length. Plans like theirs only work if you allow them to. If someone decides to betray you, it's their choice. Matt nodded. True enough. Oh, and by the way, Alex was shot last night. He's in the ICU on a ventilator, and it doesn't look good. Once they turn it off, he's gone. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Steve? Steve met Matt's gaze with a level expression. You're the detective, Matt. Do you think I had anything to do with it? Matt chuckled. Nah, just messing with you. Turns out it was a guy named Jared Garcia. Alex was sleeping with his wife. Now both Jared and his wife are missing, and Alex is barely holding on. Looks like this story might just come to a fitting end. They both chuckled. 2 months later, as Steve packed up his office, placing his belongings into a box, he sensed someone's presence behind him. You're leaving? A familiar voice said. Steve turned to see Linda standing in the doorway. Hello, Linda. Yes, it's time for a change. New career, new city, new life. Linda stepped closer and whispered, There's something I need to tell you, Steve. His eyes narrowed, and his voice cut through the air. Is it that you orchestrated Alex seducing my wife so you could take her place? The blood drained from Linda's face, and she stuttered, No, that's not true. I don't even know who Alex is. Steve's mouth twisted into a cold smile. Linda, if you love someone, you don't scheme against those they care about. When you do, you become their enemy. So one more step, and you'll face consequences you can't imagine. Leave now before I forget my manners. Tears filled Linda's eyes as she quickly turned and fled from his office. 2 weeks later, Steve was at the gym, pushing himself hard to regain the strength he had lost during the turmoil of the past months. He pressed the stop button on the treadmill and stepped off, drenched in sweat and breathing heavily. He sat on a bench to catch his breath. Looks like you had quite a workout today, said a cheerful voice from his left. He turned to see a striking woman, also sweaty, giving him a bright smile. Thanks. Looks like you did better than me, he said with a slight grin. She laughed. See you later. I need to hit the showers. A few minutes later, Steve made his way to his locker and pulled out his phone. A notification for a new message appeared, and he opened it to find a simple smiley emoji. He chuckled, feeling a rare moment of lightness. Thousands of miles away, an ambulance rushed to the hospital. Inside, the medic worked frantically to stabilize the patient. She's losing blood fast. Step on it, he yelled to the driver. 15 minutes later, an ER doctor checked for a pulse, then lowered his head and said, It's too late. She's gone. A police officer approached the truck driver, who stood by, still in shock. How fast was she going? I was doing about 30. She had to be going at least 100, the driver stammered, eyes wide. I hit the brakes, but she didn't even slow down before crashing into the back of my truck. All right, the cop said. We may need to contact you for more questions if necessary. Officer Pat turned to his partner. Let's wait for the autopsy report. See if she was intoxicated. With that car wrecked so badly, I doubt the forensics team will find much. We might end up just calling it reckless driving. Officer Jones nodded. Sounds about right. Later that day, Steve's phone rang. He checked the caller ID and answered, Hello, Matt. It's like you expected my call, Matt said. Steve smiled. No, it's just a beautiful day here in Thailand. Matt's tone shifted. Steve, Alex died a few days ago, and Linda died this morning. This time I'm not kidding. How'd you think I did it, Matt? You're the detective, Matt. Figure it out. Like you said, this story has a happy ending. Have a great day, Steve added. And good luck finding out how I did it before hanging up. Matt stayed silent for a moment before murmuring to himself, I will, Steve. I will. 2 months earlier, Jared Garcia sat in his office when an envelope arrived. Inside were photos of his wife and Alex. Jared, an ex-Marine discharged for PTSD after a solo mission gone wrong in Afghanistan, had a reputation for volatility. The betrayal pushed him over the edge. Alex was strong, but no match for a trained Marine. 3 bullets sealed his fate. Jared's wife disappeared, and the sender of the envelope remained unknown. 5 months later, Matt pieced things together over drinks with a cop friend. The realization hit him. He had taken the pictures and given them to Steve. The investigation revealed Linda's end of life was due to a car accident, with unprescribed sedatives found in her system. The police concluded she was a regular user and closed the case. However, Matt discovered the sedatives had the same manufacturing date, just a week before her end of life. He knew Linda wasn't independent. Someone had slipped the pills into her meal. Her last meal was chicken soup and dumplings from the Blazing Dragon. The waiter who served her had started a month before and quit on the day of her accident. Chen Lu had returned to his hometown in China after amassing a sum too large for just 5 months of work. 7 months later, Steve was savoring the fresh air when his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and smirked. Hello, Matt. How's life treating you? He answered. I'm good, Steve. And you? Matt's voice was steady. Enjoying some soup, Steve replied, a hint of amusement in his tone. I wanted to let you know. I figured it out, Matt said, a note of finality in his voice. I knew you would, Matt. But I assume you realize there's nothing solid enough to tie me to it in court, Steve said calmly. Yes, Steve, it could be linked to you, but it wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. I just wanted to say it's been good working with you. Thanks for everything, Steve. Steve's smile deepened. Thank you, Matt. Steve hung up and ordered another bowl of soup at a new restaurant on a quiet street in Inku, China.